Hear ye! Know all plants by these present. You have been summoned to this video by their royal magnificencies, and you shall henceforth bow down before the rulers of the Anthurium kingdom. Well, technically it's a genus, but you know what? I'm done with the voice. Until recent years, the King and Queen Anthuriums were extremely rare and hard to find, and they were not cheap. You definitely had to know a guy. Who knew a guy? But now, thanks to a surge in plant popularity, we are seeing an increasing quantity of rare plants bred and tissue cultured to meet the demand and lower the price tag. But that doesn't take the swagger away from these beauties. In fact, quite the opposite. Since more plant enthusiasts than ever now have them in their collection, we can all appreciate this exotic plant duo live and in person. Their reign over the Anthurium genus spreads far and wide throughout Central and South America, where over 1,000 described Anthurium species dwell. And it's estimated that thousands more within the genus remain undescribed or completely undiscovered. But the king and queen themselves don't travel very far. Endemic to the rainforests of western and central Colombia, they prefer an epiphytic lifestyle, growing fairly low on a host tree to allow their pendant leaves to grow to imposing sizes. Sometimes as large as 6 feet in length. The existence of these species were realized in the late 1800s by German plant collector Gustav Wallace. At the time, Wallace worked for Veitchii nurseries, the largest group of European nurseries during the 19th century. In 1872, Wallace was sent to Colombia and returned in 1874 with many exquisite new plants, including 2 Anthuriums, equally strange and stunning. Veitchii was the first to be crowned in 1876, named after John Veitch, Scottish horticulturalist and founder of Veitchii Nurseries. And the title was well deserved. No other Anthurium could possibly be mistaken for the king. His long chartreuse leaves are emblazoned with alien-like corrugation. He's just too bold, too aggressive, too demanding of our attention. It's common to see Veitchiis for sale labeled as narrow form and wide form. The wide form tends to display more undulated or wavy leaf edges and a more spaced out corrugation pattern, while the narrow form usually has even longer leaves in maturity and abs for days. 2 years later, in 1878, Warocqueanum received her crown as the Queen Anthurium. She was named after Belgian plant collector M. Warocque. Or maybe it's Warocque. Wait, hold on.
Personnage qu'on connaît bien dans la région qui est Raoul Warocquet. Je vais pas Raoul Warocquet.
You know what? I'll just call her the Queen. The Queen also changes in appearance depending on the ecotype. The narrow dark form originates from the lowlands of Choco and Valle del Cauca departments. This ecotype is said by growers living in warm climates to be much more heat tolerant than other varieties. Other forms with ancestry in the high elevation cloud forests tend to require cooler nights to thrive. As pretty as these plants are in their juvenile forms, very few collectors can grow them to their fullest potential. These are titans in the wild after all. As their stems become larger, they will need access to more moisture. Hydrated moss around the stem is a tried and true care hack. It mimics the moisture their stems would receive while attached to the bark of their host tree. A stem exposed to dry air will cause leaves to crisp, and the plant will hold on to less leaves at a time. Yellow spots around the edges of older leaves is usually edema caused by overwatering. Edema is when cells fill with too much water at once and burst. Brown leaf tips is usually caused by underwatering. When the queen gets too dry, it goes into survival mode, reabsorbing water and nutrients from existing leaves back into the stem, the most important part of the plant. You can cut off the leaves, you can cut off all the roots, but the stem must be healthy. If it dries out or gets a fungal infection, it's game over. Now, when it comes to care requirements as a houseplant, it's usually assumed by many that these plants require extremely high humidity to thrive. However, myself and countless others have had success growing these plants without greenhouse conditions. The king is hands down the hardier of the two, but the queen can also be hacked as a houseplant, with some initial trial and error. I grow these plants in sphagnum moss in vases without drainage holes. This vessel creates a mini greenhouse of sorts around the root system, keeping the plants evenly hydrated while the ambient humidity drops, sometimes down to below 30%. I experiment with all moss substrates, fluval stratum, pumice, leca, and your standard aroid mix. And I find little difference in the results. As long as you keep it hydrated, do not let these species dry out. Drying out will cause leaf crisping and dry rot. Ample watering is ideal, so long as it's not oversaturated. Remember, these grow on the size of trees. I know it rains every day in the rainforest, but listen, your home is not the rainforest. Water is more stagnant in pots. So when you water, don't make it rain, honey. Water more moderately and more frequently so its environment stays consistent. No wet-dry cycle, especially for the queen. In botany, between genus and species, plants are categorized by section to identify species that share a common ancestor. Species within the same section tend to have similar characteristics and hybridization potential. Veitchii is in section Calamistrium. A common characteristic in this section is corrugated leaves, but none quite as aggressive as the king. Warocqueanum is in section Cardiolontium, along with many other of your favorite velvet leaf Anthuriums. So, velvet leaves and corrugated leaves. Huh. These two distinct evolutionary choices might share a similar purpose, because when you dwell in some of the wettest places on Earth, fungal attacks are always a threat. Which means leaf surfaces such as these can more effectively shed water droplets using channeled drainage. By wicking away and shedding any stagnant water off the foliage, the plants are able to keep bacterial diseases at bay. Oh, the king and queen are simply put the two most beautiful plants to ever grace Mother Earth. To find a giant specimen in the wild is no doubt a sight to behold. And most plant collectors haven't even the slightest comprehension of how spectacular they truly are in their ultimate form. So have some respect. Quit buying queens just to call them divas. She's not the diva, you're the diva. And quit whining about how slow growing your king is. He's not slow, you're just impatient. You want to fight me? Go ahead. The truth still stands. But don't get too discouraged. Trial and error is okay. And nowadays, you don't have to break the bank to get your hands on one of these exotic aroids yourself. It's no surprise that the king and queen are among the most adored and collected aroids in the plant trade. One look at them, and you're hooked. In many cases, they are the first Anthuriums a beginner collector will acquire. Due to their narrow care requirements, you might not ever see them in some interior design magazine with the ficuses and the palms and the snake plants. But hey, that's on us trying to replace Mother Nature. And anyone who has seen these plants in their monumental wild form knows that no one could ever replace Mother Nature.